Hey guys, we're going to be focusing on constraint layout in this video. So a constraint layout is basically a view group in Android, and a view group is basically a container that contains the different views that you have on your screen. So imagine you've got a text view, a button, something which you can scroll like a recycle view, a scroll view, a list view. You've got images, all of these different kind of funky components that make your screen look awesome. To put them together, you need what's called a view group. Now there's different kind of view groups. There's linear layout, relative, frame, there's constraint layout, there's a few more. But in this video we'll give a few examples of some view groups, but we're going to be mainly focusing on constraint layout. So without further ado, let's go straight into creating a Kotlin class, and I'm going to just call this my awesome fragment. Okay, and then I'm going to say create me a class. I don't wish to add that to Git, just ignore that. And then I'm going to say fragment from the support library, and hey presto, we have our fragment. And then I'm going to override the onCreateView, I believe it is called, and then I'm going to say return the inflator dot inflate r dot layout dot, let's see, we'll call it fragment underscore my well, we'll just say fragment awesome, and then it requires a container, and we'll say false over there. Let's create our layout by doing Alt Enter, and then it selected a root element as a constraint layout, so that's the view group. And if we create this, we will see essentially this page. So I'm going to click on split for now because I want to show an example using code XML. I'll make one video where I'm basically using the editor, using just the design tab, the design layout, but in this example we'll just focus on specifically XML. So you can see here that it's created constraint layout, okay, and that's the root element. And if we wanted to, we could have made, we could replace this with a relative layout, right? Another example is linear layout, okay, and there's another one, frame layout, and there's a couple, there are a couple more. So you can go onto the Android documentation to see the kind of differences. All of these different kind of view groups offer you different pros and cons, or rather they have different pros and cons. So a linear layout, if you want to just linearly display things next to one another or by the side of each other, then you would use a linear layout. If you want to have something that's more complicated, something more you know, like views to the side of each other and below one another, it's best to use constraint layout because it's quite flexible, powerful, and easy to use. One other key thing about constraint layout is you are able to have lots and lots of different components on your screen without having multiple view groups. Okay, so you can imagine that, you know, you've got elements that are next to one another, like imagine you've got a screen, right, and you've got a text view here, and then a button, you know, next to it, and then something else next to that. So there's like 4 things, all laid out horizontally. But then also you've got beneath the first view, you've got another view over there, and then beneath that there's another one. So now you've got a kind of, you know, a linear layout may not be the best approach to this because you would require 2, one that's horizontal and then another one that's vertical. So a constraint layout can pretty much do that with just having one view group, okay? And you would want to have the least amount of view groups, because if you have nested view groups, it will make the device do and perform a lot of operations to figure out what the size is and what the parent size is. Basically, there is going to be a lot of operations the deeper your layout gets. So the flatter it is, right? The flatter it is, the less view groups that you have, the more performant your application is going to be. This was a huge problem back in the days where devices weren't as powerful as they are now, but we should still focus on trying to keep our code at least a little bit optimized without having so much nested view groups. So with all of that out of the way, let's just go straight into having some components, some views onto our screen. So I'm just gonna like freestyle this, right? I'm just gonna create a text view, and I'm gonna say that its width is wrap content and its height is wrap content. That means it's gonna expand and contract based on the internal part, based on its text, I guess. So if we say text equals my name is Batman, okay, then you can see if I just zoom in over here that you can see that the border over here is exactly the width and the height of this element. But if I say match parent, you can see that it goes all the way to the edge, right? And then I can wait for it. I can just say background is, and I can pick a color. We can make it red, right? So that pretty much is the entire width, and we have made it red. But if I just put it back to wrap content, that goes back to it being the precise size, and I can do more stuff over here and just say padding is 4dp. Okay, padding is 4dp. So obviously these things that I've added, these attributes against the text view, it's got nothing to do with constraint layout. But now if I take off that red because it's hurting my eyes, if I just create another view over here, let's just say it's called button, okay, have that to be wrap content as well, and then say the text of this button is click me exclamation mark. You can see that they're pretty much on top of one another, and there's also this red squiggly error that we see. So if we just hover over it, it says this view is not constrained. It only has design time positions, so it will jump to 0, 0 at runtime unless you add the constraints. Let me translate that. It basically means you need to give it constraints. So the way you give constraints in constraint layout, and this is where it actually refers to constraint layout, right? The way you add constraints is, well, one option is you can say top to the top of the parent. Okay, now what does this mean? This means that constrain this text view, constrain the top of it to the top of the parent. Right, so the top of this text view is obviously here where my cursor is, and we're saying constrain that to the top of the parent, which is here. Okay, and if I say the start of this view goes to the start of, so this is what we need, goes to the start of the parent, you can see that the error has now gone away. That basically means that the top and the left now have an actual position, and it's no longer complaining. Now what does start to the start of mean? Because top to the top of kind of makes sense, but what does start to start of mean? Well, it basically means, in simple terms, in this case, the left, right? So you can say left to the left of, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, start is like for right and left views as well. So in some languages, or in some places, well, some languages they have right to left, whereas English is left to right. So start in their world, in their sense, would be over here, whereas the start in English would be the left hand side. So I could say left to the left of, and that's fine, right? It's the same thing in this case, but it's good practice to use start to the start of, because then you're supporting the right to the left and left to the right languages and user settings. Okay, now what do we do with this button? Well, let's basically say over here the top of this button goes to the bottom of the text view over here, but we need to give this an ID, otherwise it won't work. And we'll just call this 1 second, sorry, we'll just call this my text view, for example. Okay, and then over here we will put my text view. So when you do declare an ID for a view, you should specify the plus here, but if you're just referencing a view like we are here, we're referencing this, you do not need the plus. You just put @ID / my text view. So you can see that it's actually moved. Now I could use this over here to give it some margin, right? But as I mentioned, I don't want to use just yet the designer. We just want to focus on XML just for now, and in a later video we can cover more of the design sort of section. So it's still complaining, right? Because we've mentioned the Y position but not the X position. So over here I can say start to the start of parent, and now it's not complaining. Now that I've given this a top position, so the top of this goes to the bottom of this, because that's what this says, I can also say margin top, and then just give it like 10 dp, for example, and then it makes it go away from there. And I can also say margin start, right? Start being the left hand side in this case, 10 dp, and then it moves in. Similarly with this, because I have constrained it to the left hand side, I can give it a margin as well now, 10 dp. Oh wait, sorry, that's the top, but I can do the same for the start, 10 dp. There we go. What I can also do is, because I mentioned that the start of this is to the parent, I can also reference the text view, and nothing really will change in the design because, well, actually it will change because we have added a margin. So what's going on is we have made this view, the start of it, to the start of this, but we've also said that we want a 10 dp margin, and that's why it's taken it from here and then 10 dp across, right? Now let's make a view now that's going to be quite interesting. So I'm going to create a text view over here. I'm going to call this let's see, name text view. Okay, and then I'm going to say over here the start of this text view is to the start of the parent, and then I'm going to give this a padding of 16 dp. Do bear in mind that you should extract these as dimensions in a different file. So if I do Alt Enter, I can extract this resource. That's a better practice instead of having different magic numbers all over your code base. And over here I want to say also top to the top of the parent. And over here I'm going to say text. What we want to do is just basically create a layout which shows some basic user information, right? So I'm going to say over here, one of my friends is called Junaid, right? He's called Junaid, so we'll put his name there. He's going to laugh when he sees this video. And then we'll put over here another text view. Oops, not tag. We'll put another text view over here. Give me the whole thing, please. Thank you. And then we're going to say text is we're going to say software engineer. We're going to pretend as if that that text view is talking about his job title, job text view, and then text view over here will have a text, and this will be a description. Hi, I am an amazing iOS engineer. He's actually an iOS engineer, but Android's better though. We all know that. I am an amazing iOS engineer and I like iPhones. He uses an iPhone. Android's way better. We all know that. Okay, so what we want to do here is, okay, these are obviously on top of all they're all like mishmashed on top of one another, but we want to keep it like that for now, and we want to fix it at the end. What I want to do over here is, just before this text view, I want to create an image view, and I'll tell you why I put it there in just a second. Wrap content, actually not wrap content, we don't want to make it, actually yeah, wrap content is fine for now. ID is just image view for now, that'll be fine. Right, so what I want to do is I want to put the image view on the top left, the name should go to the right hand side of the image, and also the job text view should go beneath the name text view but still to the right hand side of the image, and then the description should go beneath everything. Okay, so how would I do that? Good question. So I want to make this the start of this to the start of the parent, and the top of this to the top of the parent. There we go. And then just so that we can see what's going on, we can say that this is 64 dp wide and 64 dp tall. So it's given us a nice little square there. And we want to give this a background so we know what it looks like. So we can say tools. Okay, and what tools basically means is that in this preview we can set the background or any other one of these properties. You can put tools against pretty much anything. In this preview we want it to be a certain color, but when you run the app we don't want it to be that color. It's just a way for you to kind of see what it's going to look like. So if I just say color is, I don't know, color accent, so yeah, that's our, for the time being, our image view. It's just a turquoisey teal kind of color. Okay, so that's working, that's fine. And as we said, we want to make the name text view to the right of the image. So how do we do that? Well, we need to change this. So it's no longer start to the start of the parent, but it's actually the start of this is to the end of the image view, right? Just like that. So now it's over there. And then we want to say, give me a margin at the very start of 4 dp. So it's moved it slightly across. Maybe 8 will look a little bit better. There we go. Okay, that's working fine. And then for the job text view, we should say over here that the top of this is to the bottom of the name text view, right? And then the start of this is to the start of the name text view. One thing to note here though is that it's exactly the same to say that the start of this is to the start of the name text view. It's the same as saying the start of this is to the end of the image view, right? And the reason why is because this position is the start of it is at the end of this image view, but it's also the start of the name text view. Like, it's both the same position, right? So we don't need to specify both of them, we can just get rid of this. That is one example where the start of this is where the start to the start of a view is better, and that's because if you ever decide to move this, everything that's constrained to this view will move along. So if you do want everything to be aligned to this, then that's better. So our description over here, we want to give it an ID. So description text view. Okay, and then this should be, the top of this should be to the bottom of the image view. So it's gone there. And then we want to say that the margin top should be 16 dp, for example. So there we have it. It's exactly as what we wanted, right? Oh, hold on. We also need to say start to the start of parent, because it was complaining that the X position wasn't specified. Awesome. Okay, so this is the basics of constraint layout, where you can specify the constraints. But let's go further now and let's do something really interesting. What if we wanted to create like a box around this specific view? How would you do that? Okay, the way you would do that is you would, over here, you would say create me a view. It's just a view, it's not a text view or a button, it's just a plain old view. And by the way, all of these views that I've got, text view, image view, button, whatever it is, they all come from and they all inherit from the view class, right? So I'm going to say that the width of this is 0 dp and the height of this is 0 dp. And you're probably thinking, what on earth is this guy talking about? How and why would it be 0 dp? Well, we are going to make the constraints inform the view how large it is in terms of width and height. So I'll basically explain exactly what that means. So over here, I'm going to say the start of this is to the start of the image view or parent. It doesn't matter. Like I said, there's different ways which you can actually parent would be better. Parent would be better because I am going to add a margin to the image view. But yeah, the start of this is to the start of the parent. Cool. So the view starts over here. Then I am going to say the top of this is to the top of, the top of this is to the top of image view, or rather parent. Let's stick with parent for now. Yep, that's fine. And then I'm gonna say the end of this is to the end of, and this is where it's gonna actually start taking shape now, the parent. Okay, and then finally, and this will draw the rectangle now, hopefully, the bottom of this is to the bottom of the description. Okay, so now our background box that we are gonna have now is pretty much taking shape. So if I just zoom out slightly, okay, it's taking shape now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a very simple background drawable. I'm going to say drawable, put that in, take that out, and I'm going to call this drawable. I'm going to say background. If I can spell, background rounded rectangle, just say rect, and it's going to be grey color for now or something. So I'm going to click Alt Enter to create me the drawable. I'm going to say give me a shape please, click OK, click cancel, don't need to put it into Git. Take that shenanigan off and say shape is going to be a rectangle. Okay, and the color of this shape, rather solid, the color of this should be for now we'll just say color primary. No, is there any other color that I've got ready available? That'll do. Although That's a bit too bright. Let's go over here. Let's add another color and let's change it a little bit. Let's change it to something a little more good. That'll do. Then we'll change this and we'll just say background color, for example. Color background, not background. Okay, so fantastic. That's our background color. But also we want to say corners, radius, and just give it a stupidly large numbers to make sure that it's always going to be rounded off. There we go. Cool. So now we've got our background. So just tab back to the view and we have, actually I want to maybe make it less, just maybe make it maybe 8 dp. Yeah, I think that's better. And then the background color, I want to maybe make it a bit lighter. That's better. Awesome. So we do have our background here, but it's quite flush up against the edges here, and I think it will look way better if it comes a little bit off from the edges in terms of these internal views. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that the margin top is 16 dp. Okay, so now it's moved inwards and you can see the background there. And then also I'm going to say that the margin start is also 16 dp. So it's actually moved along. Now the important thing here to understand is that because these two were constrained, well rather this was constrained to the image view and this is constrained to that image, because that's moved a bit inwards, so has that. And because that's moved, so has that. So you can have like one specific central point where you anchor a constraint like this, and then everything that's constrained to that has to then move because this has moved. Okay, so now what I want to say here is this text view here, we have said that the top of this is to the top of the parent, but really we wanted it to be aligned to this. So we can change that by saying the top of this is to the top of not the parent but the image view, right? And it's gone exactly there. And maybe we want to add a bit more margin over here as well, so we say margin top and then we give it like a 2 dp or something, and then maybe slightly more just so that it's visible. Okay, so that looks a bit better. And then over here we can say that the start of this is not to the start of the parent but again the image view, and as you can see it's moved in. Now if you look at this view, I remember I said that it would be better to constrain it to this text view and not that. The reason why is because if I, on this text view, if I say that the margin start is like 20, this moves along as well, and that's because it's constrained to this and not this, right? So if I come back to this job text view and if I say that the start of this is to the end of the image view, then it's not going to be aligned to this text view, and so that's why I've decided to put this to be the start of that text view, and so now it's nicely aligned. Cool. The last thing that we want to do is we've got a nice border around this whole thing, but we don't have a border here. So in order for us to achieve this, you probably are going to say or think now that we need to add a margin bottom, right? Margin bottom of 10 dp. But as you can see, it hasn't made a difference. And that's because we should use, in this case, padding, because margin is the actual like outer location, right? So you know how I specified a margin on this, and so therefore this moved. If I added over here not a margin but a padding, right? So if I say padding start, you can see that the text view, it still starts off there. It's just that internally it's moved across, right? So if I was to apply a margin here, it wouldn't really show the background. It wouldn't have that space because the margin moves the physical element. Whereas padding, it doesn't move the element, it just moves the internal part of the component, the internal part of the view. So if I change this to be padding bottom, you can see that it's actually grown and there's 10 dp over there, and now we actually have a nice perfect box around our view with nice rounded corners, and everything looks a lot better than what you did before. But there's still more improvements to make here, and that is, say for example, if the person's name is going to be very large, you can see that there's a problem that's going to happen, and it just starts to forever expand. Well, almost forever. Now, why is that the case? The reason why it does that is because, let me just make this back into Junaid. The reason why it does that is because we haven't told, we've just basically said that this text view is wrap content. Like, just keep growing based on however big you are. But we want to constrain this, right? We want to make sure that this doesn't exceed or, basically transgress its boundaries. We don't want it to go over the boundary, and the boundary in this case is going to be, is obviously the this grey border. Go away, mouse. So the way you would do that is by simply having end, an end constraint. So we say end to the end of not the parent but the view, which doesn't have an ID yet. So I'm just going to say ID equals background. Okay, so that's now got a background, and I do need to put a plus over here. There we go. And then over here I just say background. So that does that, and then now it's gone into the center because it's got like a tug of war almost, where we're saying that the start of this is to the end of there, and the end of this is to the end of this. So therefore it has to like compromise and go in the middle. But again, we can get away with this by specifying 0 dp. So we don't want it to just we don't want to essentially wrap content. We're just going to basically say that expand based on these constraints, right? If we say wrap content, then it still becomes wrap content, but it has to move to respect the constraints. And because there are conflating constraints, it compromises by going in the middle of these two. So saying 0 dp will basically fix this issue, but then we also want to say margin end and then give this like 16 dp. So now you can see that if I was to type an exceedingly large name over here, it would be perfectly fine. It would just keep flowing more and more, right? Let's make this back into just Junaid. Similarly with this, we can provide the same constraints that we did to the name to the actual text view over here, which is job text view, to make sure that it doesn't overflow and it will look nice and uniform. And these constraints really help you to understand that when there are different values, some names are bigger than others, as we saw here, or some job titles are going to be shorter than others. You just have to make sure that the constraints are there to make sure that it satisfies scenarios where there may be more value, there may be more text. So there's so much more to cover with constraint layout, and I'll be making more videos, but this was just a very quick introduction to constraint layouts. There's also really good stuff like barriers and guidelines. You can do so much more with constraint layout. There's funky animations as well that you can do, but we'll cover that hopefully in a different video. I hope this was helpful. If you do create a constraint layout in your application, please do share it, and like this video if you think it was useful. Subscribe please as well, and I shall see you all in the next video.